Globalization, the growing integration of economies and societies around the world, has been one of the most hotly debated topics in international economics. Globalization has positive aspects, but globalization has also generated significant international opposition like environmental degradation. But what is the concept of globalization? Globalization is the most talked and debated issue in the contemporary world. It is a concept that escapes precise decision in most cases. It is described rather than defined. Some commentators have described globalization as a stage of capitalism or late modernity, and some remarks that globalization is a new way of thinking. However, it does not mean the same thing. For some, globalization is a process of opening up economy so the trade between countries could take place freely. For them, increasing globalization has helped the expansion of opportunities for nations and benefited workers in rich and poor countries alike, brings positive benefits for consumers, helping to increase choice, drive down prices, improve services, and create new job and opportunities. International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization, and more, generally the high-income countries are held responsible for influencing and largely determining the course of globalization process. They are also seen the driving forces behind the policy reforms that the developing countries had to implement as part of their structural adjustment programs under the supervision of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, and the World Trade Organization.
I think we're moving back to the attitude of the United States after the First World War rather than after the Second World War. Secondly, globalization depended on the European Union advancing, sucking in more members. That process has reached its limits and is beginning with Brexit to reverse. The European Union is essentially now reached its limits, essentially paralyzed. What's gone wrong? I think what's gone wrong essentially is that the globalizers overpromised and underdelivered. They promised that globalization would produce a world of obvious benefits for everybody, a more prosperous, a more stable, a more pleasant world.
In a wider perspective, globalization covers various activities, such as cultural globalization, political globalization, ecological globalization, and economic globalization, and so on. Some other aspects of globalization as well as economic globalization implies increasing global interlinkages of the markets and goods services. Such process has speeded up in the recent decade. The contributory factors for rapid economic globalization are liberalization, deregulation, privatization, and declining costs of transport and communication. The microelectronics revolution has irrevocably changed the essence of human contact to Earth. Distances are shrinking and information is spreading faster than ever before.
After the Second World War, we gradually began to reconstruct the world of global integration. From 1945 to the financial crisis, the world became more integrated. You had a more ambitious, more hubristic notion of globalization constantly pushing the world together.
In the developing countries, lack of efficient production facilities, adequate infrastructure, weak management capacities, low level of technology and lack of technological capacity, and inefficient transportation, communication, and education limits their potential to specialize in crucial productive sectors and to reap the benefit of preferential trading facilities for economies. Like most developed countries, to integrate into the world trading system on terms and conditions favorable to their development needs, they need to build their capacity to negotiate at the multilateral level. This will only happen if they are able to increase their ability to understand the multilateral trading regime espoused by the World Trade Organization, formulate their national policies to benefit from it. They also need to strengthen their capacity to benefit from international trade by increasing their competitiveness through investment in infrastructure, development of human resources, strengthening of institutional capacities and technological capacities, and supporting local enterprises, including linkages between large and small enterprises.
How do we continue to boost the global economy as it has been boosted over the last 30 years? What do we do? And the scenario was different. So in the 1940s, there were just really, really high tariffs and quotas and really high or really protectionist policies at all the borders. And so lowering those could have this profound influence. But by the 80s, a lot of those quotas were pretty low. A lot of those tariffs were already pretty low. So they began to think outside the box, and they seized on this idea of non-tariff barriers. And now this leads into the modern era of trade I'm talking about now. Now, non-tariff barriers are the idea that it doesn't really matter how low a tariff is around a country's border. If once a product gets inside, it has to compete on an uneven playing field. So once you have, Jim Beam, for example, it doesn't matter if Japan doesn't have a tariff on liquor. If once it's inside Japan, it has to compete on the same shelf next to a Japanese liquor that's subsidized by the Japanese government.
Small and medium enterprises have been playing a significant role in the economic development of most developing countries. Potential benefits of e-commerce for the developing countries are immense. Any companies can enter global markets where size and location have become rather irrelevant. Even at most accounts of globalization have been silent on its consequences for most or for knowledge framework. Less developed countries must need to strengthen their capacity by increasing their competitiveness through investment in infrastructure, development of human resources, strengthening of institutional capacity, enhancement of technological capability, educational improvement, and supporting local enterprises, including linkages between large and small enterprises. Even though there are those who do not support globalization, the fact that it is here to stay, and if we do not embrace it, this thought we may get burned. But the challenges for less developed countries is how to achieve a sustainable development in the globalized world and rapid technological change driven by inequalities of wealth and power. And the main question is how less developed countries could achieve competitive advantage when the injustice global competition for educated talent has been distorted. The local market for educated professionals in many less developed countries, as the population of the developed world ages, many countries face shortages of quality educated professionals. Everything and everyone is starting to become connected and to find themselves embedded within a network fabric of information that is wrapping around the world, disrupting the centuries-old structures that carved up the planet into separate jurisdictions and societies, while the logic of hierarchical management within the national framework has retreated and the market has proven unsustainable. Information networks are emerging as a new form of globally distributed coordination. Token markets can potentially enable the management of self-sustaining economies in a distributed fashion, without dependence on the centralized institution of the nation or corporation. The responsibility has shifted to the hands of every person. The question is one of the values. What values do we build into this set of emerging information-based networks that is being pieced together with every new connection made? The world of yesterday was ruled by the states and armies. The world of today by markets and finance. The world of tomorrow will be an empire of networks. But who will rule that empire? Could it be us?